The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle.
That my enemies are slow, that my fevers are weak, that my lessons don't hurt, that my medicine is sweet, that these days are not the pearls, and I am not the swine.
Welcome to The Marinade, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. Each episode we welcome musicians, actors, comedians, authors, visual artists, filmmakers, anyone who creates art to talk about how and why we make stuff. This is episode 158, and our guest for the second time is Joe Pug. Pug is a revered singer, songwriter, and podcaster from Greenbelt, Maryland. He's been releasing music since 2009's classic record Nation of Heat, which was about the time his work came into my life. His latest album, Sketch of a Promised Departure, will be released on March 3rd, 2024. The first time I got to talk with Joe Pug, it was a remote conversation back in 2021. The world was pretty much still shut down, and it was a special conversation, something that Marinade fans continue to point to as one of their favorites. This time, y'all, we got to sit down with Joe backstage ahead of his show at Tuffy's Music Box in Sanford, Florida. The wonderful songwriter and friend of the show, Michael McArthur, opened with Josh Davis on guitar, also a good friend of the show. The atmosphere was welcoming and beautiful, and I'm so grateful to bring you this episode. Everyone, it's my great honor to bring you the return of Joe Pug.
That it feels just like a memory when my father calls me home, like I'm racing under streetlights, back to dinner on the stove, that there's a candle in my window, that there's roses on my grave from those that I befriended.
Dude, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So excited. We got to do this on Zoom 2 years ago now, it seems like, I guess.
Might have been longer than that.
Might have been longer than that. Things weren't opened up yet, I don't think, when you and I caught up on the phone.
They took a while to open up, and even when they did open up for the live music business, things didn't really go back to normal until about this time last year or 18 months ago, believe it or not.
Man, that's really interesting. I want to dive into some of that. I want to first just ask you how this Florida run has gone so far. You played Gainesville last night.
It's interesting. I was just talking with Michael McArthur, who's opening these shows, and so it hasn't been going well.
Oh, interesting.
But hold on. It hasn't been going well by the numbers, technically. All the shows are undersold.
Okay.
But I had a talk with my agent this morning where I was like, you know what? The venues are good. There seems like there's people down here. In a way that it wasn't the case 10 years ago, I feel like there's a home for this music down here right now. So the 50 or 75 people who are showing up, normally if I went to a town at this point in my life and there was 50 or 75 people there, I'd be like, cool, let's call it good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't need to come back here. But I feel like there's something going on in Florida right now. To the place we played in Gainesville last night, Heartwood Soundstage, that would not have existed 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The place we're playing, there's a place up in Tampa that's a listening room that would not have existed 10 or 15 years ago. So long story short is not as well as I would have hoped that it would have gone this particular tour, but I do see something here, and I'm gonna kind of push my chips in on Florida and start coming back here.
Oh man, that excites me. Yeah. there's a scene here for sure, and I agree with you that 10 years ago it wasn't what it is now. I mean, Kyle Keller opened for you last night, right?
Yes.
And Kyle's fantastic. Good friend of the show, buddy of mine. There's a bunch of guys in this town, and gals in this town that are excellent songwriters. There's a bunch of folks in Orlando proper too, and there's an appetite for this kind of music. So I'm really glad to hear you say that. I'm bummed that the numbers aren't what they should be, but
it's okay. It's what happens when you don't play a place. I mean, if you're an independent musician, the first time you go into markets, it's just not going to be great. And I have never built down here. Every other market that I've built, I've gone to every 12 months or 18 months for the last 15 years. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
That this is like this. And I just, this is an hour and 45-minute Southwest flight from where I live. It feels easy to me. So, yeah, I think we're going to come back.
Good. I'm glad. I'm really glad to hear that. The first time I saw you was in Jacksonville opening for Steve Earle.
God, yeah. The Florida Theater.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll never forget. I mentioned this last time, but it's worth mentioning again. I'll never forget you made the joke about pulling up in like your Corolla or whatever, and Steve and his tour bus was parked outside.
Chasing the bus in my, I had a silver Windstar.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that was a really fond memory. My dad and I went, and I've been a fan since. Like that was my introduction.
Right on.
To your music,
Wow.
and I've been a huge fan since. So, yeah, please come back. Speaking of the Earle family, though, I wanted to tell you a story that I think you'll appreciate, which is I was watching you with Otis Gibbs talk. There was a series of videos. I don't know if it ended up being in like one long podcast form or what, but it was great where you were telling Justin Townes Earle stories.
Yeah.
And you talked about the fact that he was, and we all knew this, but it was just interesting to hear you who had a firsthand experience with it, how he spent so much money on his shirts and so forth. And then Isbell's Weather Vanes comes out, and he's got that song about...
Yeah, what's up?
You're in the middle of something.
No, it's all good.
Did y'all have any guest lists for tonight?
I got no guest list, no. And I don't think Michael's back here. But yeah, thanks, Cliff. I appreciate it.
There's a lyric in When We Were Close from Weather Vanes where he says, and your shirt costs more than your guitar.
Yeah.
And it was just I connected it immediately to your conversation with Otis.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to take this a step further, which is I am leaning into fashion in the new year, and and that lyric inspired me to lean into fashion. I just thought you'd appreciate that.
Nice.
It's like a fun connection of like, I randomly one night was like having beers, watching videos on YouTube, and I found you and Otis Gibbs talking about that. Those amazing stories.
Justin was genuinely into fashion. I've never been into fashion, but I've had a lot of good friends who are. So it's one of those deals where you're like, I don't understand it, but enough people whose opinion I respect, like I get it,
Yeah.
And Justin, he was really into it, and he knew. I mean, he was telling me about Billy Reed before Billy Reed had stores all over the place. You know what I mean? Like he was really into all the Billy Reed stuff and all that. And I mean, you can't deny it. He just looked like $1 million on stage. So
that marks 2 episodes in a row Billy Reed's come up.
Well, if you're talking Justin in fashion, that's that name is sure to follow.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I was talking to the comedian Max Fine, who's from Atlanta, and he was talking about Billy Reed because we started talking about fashion because it's on my mind. So it came up. You mentioned talking about being an independent artist, and like last time we talked, you were really leaning into like thinking through what the physical product of your work looks like and what you're presenting, like what you have to provide for your fans. And you've made these huge strides since then. And I'm interested if you could talk a little bit about that and the decisions that you made and how the vault came together and what that looks like.
Yeah, I brought my merchandise whole operation in-house. I used to have a third party do it, and BJ Barham was the one that told me to do that because I called him up and I said, I think I'm paying this third party too much money. I was like, effectively 25% of the gross. And he said, yeah, you can save some money by doing it this way, and that's good, but that's not the reason you should do it. The reason you should do it so that you understand your audience a lot more. And he was right. I have saved money, and a dollar saved is a dollar earned for sure, but I understand a lot better what people like and what I can send them home with that'll bring, joy to them, creative joy. And yeah, most recently I basically started for lack of a better word, like a subscription service on my website. I've branded it. It's called The Vault, and it works out good for me. I've seen a couple artists start to try to do it, but the problem is they have nothing to paywall. You know what I mean? Like So for me, I have a podcast that has 250 episodes. I can paywall that. Then the other critical thing is I own the masters and the publishing of all of my work.
Oh, awesome.
And so if you have a label that owns a popular album of yours and you say, well, we want to take this off Spotify and paywall it, they'll go, cool, it's not yours. It's not yours to paywall. We could paywall it.
Yeah.
If we're Dual Tone or Atlantic or Canvasback or whoever, like we could paywall it, but you as the band can't because it's not yours anymore. You sold it to us. So I was in a unique position to do that, and it's been going good. I had to take a lot of quote-unquote pay cuts over the years by never selling the masters. You know what I mean? Like I could have cashed out early a lot of times. I kept on thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing, man? Like maybe I should just take the payday. And then when it came to this subscription service or this paywall, basically, I realized, like, okay, this is why I was saving this, because now I own all this stuff. I can do whatever I want. I could take all of it off the internet tomorrow and just make it disappear if I wanted to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's how the Vault came together, and luckily I have enough stuff to put behind there, and we got a good crew of folks behind there now, and I'm just trying to figure out how to serve them and bring them cool stuff.
Man, that's awesome. Okay, this leads me into a question that came from one of our Patreon patrons who's a Florida songwriter, Rambler Kane. Great young songwriter, and he's a huge fan of yours, and he asked on the Patreon, what sort of wisdom or advice would you give to a young songwriter starting out? And I'm interested in however you want to answer that question, but also the decision to make sure that you're keeping the rights to all your music and like how you navigated those waters.
It's not always the right decision, though, to keep the rights to your music. I mean, look at how well Zach Bryan has played it all with, he had this groundswell thing. He ends up partnering with Atlantic or whoever, but it was a major, and it took him from huge to hugest thing in the world. You know what I mean? So, no, I have no idea. I don't know him, and I don't know what the details of his deal are. Maybe he didn't give up any control of it, but I'm assuming if you're with a major, you have to. But it worked out great for him. It was a smart move. So I don't think the idea is to always not give up creative control. I think if you're a young songwriter, I wouldn't take it too seriously or too personally in a way. It's like I've just seen it happen so many times where people who are I'll put it to you this way. I never could have guessed the friends of mine who ended up becoming the most successful and the friends of mine who ended up becoming the least successful. I never could have guessed it at a hand.
Oh, interesting.
You listen to I'm a big NFL guy, and if you listen to a lot of the analysis of that, what drives them crazy is they have all these metrics and all these stats, and yet still they cannot figure out how to draft a good quarterback out of college.
Yeah.
It's like they just cannot come up with the magic sauce, the formula to figure it out. Yeah. And that's because when you're dealing with multivariate systems, it's just kind of beyond our capacity right now. So if you're a young person getting into a game as complex and as strange as the entertainment business, well, you can't take any of it too personally. And that goes for the good stuff as well as the bad stuff. If stuff pops off for you really quick and it's going great, that doesn't mean that you're the second coming of Christ. It just means stuff has been going great for you, and be grateful for that and keep your head down and stay humble. And if things aren't going good for you, it doesn't mean that you're a morally stained bad person. It's just those are the breaks, man. And so enjoy it and don't take it personally.
Man, that's great. That's really good stuff. And when you were a young songwriter, I mean, I got to see you when
Yeah.
you were, kind of starting out, and you're on tour with Steve Earle.
Yeah.
What did those like ups and downs feel like at that time? Because I would imagine that had to be a huge high, and then, but it ain't all gravy. So like, can you think back to those times and like how you felt and what you sort of how you navigated those waters?
That was a huge high. I was about 24 years old, and I went on the road with Steve, and that's the hugest high of it. Is that's when I quit my job. That's when I quit my 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Pounding nails.
And that's when you knew, because you're like, I mean, like, how did you know that?
There was money on the books.
Yeah.
I had quote unquote money on the books with I knew my 9 to 5. God, what was I making then? I was making like $15 an hour, which back then, 15 years
That's a lot of
ago,
money.
was legit. You
Yeah.
know, for a 24-year-old without a college degree, it was good. So I'm making, I don't know what that amounts to, $800 a week or something like that, and that's quote unquote money on the books. I know I have my $800 a week coming in. That's how I pay for my place, pay for everything. Well, when the Steve tour comes up and when other gigs start coming in and you have an agent and you can look at your itinerary, and all of a sudden, in the same way that there was money on the books for carpentry, there was money on the books for being a songwriter. I could plan my next 6 to 12 months because barring injury or sickness, I was going to get paid. You know what I mean? So that's how I knew it was time. It was just, someone offered me money to do it,
Right. Do you think there were transferable skills from carpentry to either songwriting as a process or understanding songwriting as sort of a career?
I don't think so much on the creative end. There would be, but I do. If you're in the trades, you're generally a contractor, and that's what I am. That's what I am now. I'm a contractor now with all these venues.
Yeah.
It's all at will employment, and it's a very similar. If I'm at a party with people our age these days, I always get along with the contractors. You know what I mean? Because we have a very similar vibe.
Yeah, that's great. I don't think I knew you were an big NFL guy.
It's the only sport. I was always into all the different sports as a kid, but then as you get older, you just get less time for things, and for whatever reason, that's the only thing I've kept up with.
Interesting.
Diehard Skins guy. Although I have a kid who is 7 now, and I don't think I'm going to make him grow up a Skins or Commanders fan. And in fact, he's watching the Ravens game right now with my dad.
Okay.
And if the Ravens go to the Super Bowl this year, I will have lost him forever as a Washington fan, which I'm fine with. I mean, it's such a crap franchise, and I hope that he's happy with his Baltimore team.
Well, name the team the fucking Commanders. Like, dude, the Washington football team was right. It was fine. It was fine.
It was much better than Commanders.
It was so much better.
Yeah, it's a shame.
It is a shame. Who do you think when you look back on your fandom, maybe as a Washington football team fan, let's just call them that from now on.
Sure.
Or just NFL in general.
Yeah.
Who do you think are the most creative football players that you've watched?
Favre, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Favre was up there. Yeah. He was really fun to watch, and 80% of the time he'd be creative in a great way, and then 20% of the time it'd be like a real shit show.
Yeah.
So Favre was great. I got a year and a half, only a good year of RG3. And RG3, that in like 2013 in Washington, when they went to the playoffs before Shanahan got his knee shredded.
Yeah.
He was fun that year, man. And
yeah.
Really creative. Looked a lot, it's like a younger Lamar. Now Lamar's like really in control, and he really chooses his spots when to run and stuff. But RG3 was really creative. But Favre, as far as like longevity of career goes, and the amount of creativity that went into that, for sure.
Man, I wouldn't have thought of Favre. That's an excellent call. Lamar is probably. I'm a big Jaguars fan, so.
Okay, yeah. So you guys played him a bunch.
Yeah, and and he just shreds us. He's just like
yeah.
He's just so good. He's also a Florida boy. And he went to Louisville, but he's from South Florida.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's a country boy from South Florida, and I've always felt like he was underestimated because he's a country boy from South Florida. And
could be, but he just negotiated his own big-ass contract.
That's what I'm saying. He's a smart dude. He's savvy.
Dude. And after signing that contract, I mean, he looked great this year. He was 24-10 when you and I started this interview, so they're probably going to go to the conference championship, and he
Yeah.
looks great, man. Is Lawrence a guy or no?
Yeah.
He's a guy?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the real deal.
I've seen him play about 2 games.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think when you have expectaw like he had, and also, this is my Jacksonville chip on my shoulder coming out, right? Yeah. Also, is that people would immediately jump on they're sharks that smell blood, right? They're going to jump on any sign of weakness or anything. Dude, he was hurt all year.
This year?
Yep. He had a bad ankle. He had a bad knee. He had a concussion. He had a bad shoulder and throwing shoulder, And so did he play his best this year? No. But when you actually watch every game obsessively the way that I do, he is fully in control. Like, he is the real deal. And there were times when he was overcompensating because guys were dropping the ball. Like, he's hitting guys in the hands, and they're not open either. He's dropping it in there. And he's hitting guys in the hands, and they're not making the catch. So eventually he has to start forcing things. Yeah. Right? And so the national media narrative becomes that way because, his stats weren't great. But if you watched every game, what you saw was a guy who is the guy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm all in some ways, I'm just a big NFL fan, so I want as many competent quarterbacks as possible because I just like watching the games, and my son is so into it now, and it was a really bad wild card weekend last week. All the games sucked except we got to watch that the Lions-Rams game. Yeah. And when it's good, it's good. And that was a great wild card game. Yeah. And the Lions won after all these years, and my son was just getting hyped watching it. I'm a fan of a team, but my team has been bad for so long that I just watch. I will watch any game. I'll watch any game. And next weekend at my house for the conference championships will just be holiday weekend.
That's so fun, man. Yeah. That's really great. You have that gift with your son. To get to watch it. Does he have any musical? Oh,
we take a quick break.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, do it. Yeah. Sorry. Lots of great dead air content though while you were gone. So yeah. Very charming stuff. Peter gave us a Social Security number. We're
boom.
We're in good shape. Yeah. Everybody's gonna get rich. I was asking you though if we were talking about how special it is that you get to share watching football with your son, and I was wondering how you feel about as a parent and as a musician. Are you encouraging him to play, or
football?
Music.
Music. Yeah, he's 7 now, so I haven't pushed it on him earlier than this. Yeah, but I think in the next year I'll probably start putting a guitar in his hands. Merle Fest happens up in Maryland in May, so I'll probably take him to Merle Fest, let him see some people play bluegrass music. Usually there's a contingent of younger people at bluegrass festivals that are playing kind of closer to his age. So kind of let him see people his age, or not his age, but, a little bit closer to his age, are doing it. And then once he sees that, probably put something in his hands this time next year, or maybe in the fall of next year.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever played Swanee, by the way?
No.
In Live Oak? Spirit of the Swanee Music Park?
No.
All right, now that you're fired up about Florida, I want
to...
Yeah, the Roots Festival's there. I think people would love you, and
Is that summertime?
There's one in October, and there's one in March.
There's
several festivals there, but the Roots festivals that I feel that's where Peter Rowan plays, Jim Lauderdale. Okay. Every year Jim Lauderdale plays. Every year Verlin Thompson plays.
All right, we got to talk when this is done. Yeah, because I do want to come back, so I'd love to get I know you're so dialed in down here. I'd like to get your idea of the best way to attack that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I want to talk about Sketch of a Promised Departure. Mm-hmm. I've only heard the singles so far, and they're fucking great.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm not surprised, but I'm also just so excited that they're that good, right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but also one of the things that I think has been fun about your career is, and I think about this, since we last talked, Nation of Heat Revisited was released as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that was that kind of record that people are really in love with, right? A lot of people, me included, are really in love with that record. It was our introduction to you. It was a big, big part of what we attach to the thing that you do. When you did Revisited, it's one of those things where you kind of hold your breath as a fan. Yeah. Where you're like, is this going to be what I hope it is, and
Yeah.
it exceeded expectations, right?
Excellent.
It was absolutely outstanding. But what we're hearing from you in that record, and then also what I've heard from the singles from the new record, is just a lot more. There's a lot more going on, and I'm wondering about that decision, and then also about like how comfortable you are with that decision.
Yeah, these are the first 2 records that I've produced myself, and I work on them at home, and I do all the arranging myself. And so, for better or for worse, this is as close as possible thus far as I've gotten to what my sound is. And luckily, I'm just in a position now where I've done this for long enough where I have the phone numbers of world-class musicians, and the only thing that you need to make a great record is world-class musicians. And I can give them all a call. They don't work for no money; they cost, but everything costs. And
Sure.
I'm able to get some pretty great performances from folks.
Well, that does come up a lot, I think, when I think about your career, is the fact that you have all these people in your orbit who are world-class musicians, right?
Yeah,
Some
for
of
sure.
my favorite musicians play on your records and are friends of yours and so forth, right? We've talked about B.J. Barham before, and who else? Like Dave DeBorja was on, Revisited, and like there's several of my favorite musicians and songwriters that are involved in this recent project.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about, like, what lessons have you learned about maintaining those relationships over the years? Because people are willing to do it, right? Because you have that relationship with them, and they believe in the music, no doubt. But what have you learned over the years about, like, maintaining relationships like that?
I mean, with relationships like that, it's just paying people very well. And never asking for a bro rate. I never ask for a bro rate from anybody. I always pay quickly and pay well. And I think music is so weird, and so many people get emotions caught up in it. I always tell younger musicians that if you're in a band and there's a band leader, if the band leader starts talking about out of nowhere how we're all a quote-unquote family around here, get out of there now, because you're getting ready to be paid half of what you're worth.
Oh, shit.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, we're not family. We can be close, I guess, but we're not family. And if you have people who are doing something that's world class, they need to be paid that way. And money talks and bullshit walks.
Yeah.
And so that's how I maintain the relationships. Whatever I never try to negotiate down the rate. I ask them what their rack rate is. They send me a rack rate back. Some of them are really expensive, and I just pay it, man.
Yeah.
And if I can't afford to pay it, I don't ask them to do it. There's none of that shit. It's just like, you tell me what you want to get paid. Okay, let's go. Either I can afford it or I can't. And there's some guys, sometimes I get quoted something, and I just come back and say, great, it's not in the budget right now. Love you, man. And I'll reach out to you again. And when I reach out to them again about another project, it's not to talk them down on price. It's to say, I know what your rate is now, and I have that in my budget. So this is how many songs we have to work with.
Yeah.
So pay people. That's it. Pay them.
When you're writing a song, or maybe when you've written it and you're looking to fill out that sound, do you have like a roster of people that you're thinking of, or are you, as you're writing, thinking like, I'd really like to have Sadler Vaden play on this or whatever?
No, I'll generally finish it and then just decide who is available. But, I mean, availability is a big part of it, too. It's just like, who's available this week to work on it? And once you're working with a certain caliber of musicians, yes, one person might be 5% better than the other, but generally, once they're working at a certain type of level, I say this with an emphasis on awe, because I'm a songwriter. I'm not a musician, so I'm in awe of musicians who that's part of their skill set. I'm in awe. I can't believe it, and I think what they do is magic, and without that magic, the songs just don't come to life.
Man, that's interesting. I've never heard anybody put it like that. I'm a songwriter and not a musician.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's not like you don't play several instruments.
Right. I can play guitar. I can play piano. I'm not a musician. Like, if you were to come in here with a song, or another songwriter were to come in here with a song right now and be like, Joe, accompany me, I mean, I really wouldn't be able to.
Interesting. Okay, so you can write for you and
Yeah.
what you hear and what you
And
need,
look,
but
I mean, yes, I could pluck along on the guitar, and I could pluck along on. I could stab away at the piano, and I could play the right chords.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not what musicians do.
yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
They're playing melodies and counter melodies, and they're framing things, and they are doing different inversions of chords, and they're doing it in real time without even thinking about it, because to them, playing their instrument is like what ice skating is to a hockey player. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just they don't even think about it. They just react.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh man. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on things, and I feel like there's a certain amount of like humility that needs to come into that, but also like a self-awareness that comes into that, right? And like
Yeah.
sort of acknowledging the difference. All right, so shifting gears a little bit, as a songwriter, when you we were listening to The Diving Sun last night, and I have that vinyl copy, and we were just like spending time with it and listening to it and
Yeah.
thinking about it. And then I was thinking about our conversation the last time, which was about right after that came out, if I remember
right.
the timeline
Yeah,
correctly. Yeah. And at that time, some of those songs were like kind of had been sitting around for a while and that sort of thing. What about this collection of songs? Is this
Yeah.
something that like you wrote in between then, or are these newer songs? Or these? Where did
This is
come
kind of
from?
crazy because this is an album where pretty much no part of it existed a year ago.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And
Shit.
so it was all written between, mid-January to late August. And even one of the songs, we went to mastering in mid-September, and one of the songs wasn't even written in mid-August. I wrote Brother John a month, 3 weeks before the album was mastered. So, and then, the whole thing went to vinyl pressing. It's like the song didn't exist, and 5 weeks later, it's being pressed to vinyl. It's the quickest turnaround I've ever done with a record.
Because I remember us last time talking sort of about like in the past how things have come together somewhat more slowly. Why the difference?
It comes down to money again.
Okay.
I fund all. I don't work with the label anymore. I fund all of this. I'm the one that pays for it. So I decide, when it comes out and when it doesn't, and that allows me to work at a faster pace. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't have a big release schedule, or I have to get other things out on time. I don't have to go through, rounds of meetings about whether we think the album is good or not. I think the album's good because I worked very hard on it, and this is my vision for it, and it's done, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so go press it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's move on to touring it, and then writing another record.
So if you're doing it that way, then like, are there? Do you have thought partners other than the people playing on the record that instead of you're in a meeting and you're going, well, how are we gonna do this and what are we gonna do here? It's all you.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's your decision.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's any like codified version of that, but I definitely, as I'm working on stuff, I'll casually, with people that I'm around, it doesn't even have to be people that I'm close to, but just people that I'm around, a neighbor, a parent of one of my kids' friends. If we're around on a sound system, I'll be like, hey, let me toss something on for you real quick. You want to hear something? And everyone's always, they're excited to hear music in its, as it's being made. And I just toss it on, and whether it's my wife or my dad or a neighbor or the parent of a friend's kid, I don't listen to anything that they say to me afterwards. I just watch their body language as they listen to it. And you can tell almost instantly from their body language whether they like something or not. And then afterwards, there may be no correlation between I can tell they actually liked it or not, and whether they say that they're always going to say that they like it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's that, and then there's never any correlation. Everyone wants to say, I think it's good, but do this. You know what I mean? It's just, you shut all that out.
You know what you should do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they don't know.
Yeah.
The one thing that they do know is if they don't like it. That is super legit. If they don't like it, cool. They have no idea why they don't like it.
Yeah.
No one does, but they don't like it. They don't like it because it's not good,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not like an explicit thing where I have like a brain trust of people, giving me notes on stuff. I play it for someone and see if they enjoy it. I think it's a weird thing, like Luckily, songwriting doesn't have too much of this. I think you see it in literary communities a lot, where it's like people get together in these writers groups and like they tear each other's work apart, and they spend years, quote unquote, like refining things. And to me, it's like, I don't know. That seems like a way to avoid releasing something and calling it done. That seems like a way to abdicate responsibility for creative choices. That seems like a way of making a bunch of work that is, it's like, okay, cool. We went through, 5 years of workshops for everyone's novel, and it all sounds like Raymond Carver.
Yeah.
Great. I love Raymond Carver. I think he's great. I don't think everyone should sound like Raymond Carver.
Right.
Some people need to sound like G.K. Chesterton. Some people need to, sound like, Steinbeck, whatever. But like people should sound different. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, and I think that's part of why people attach to your music so much and connect with your music so much, because you don't sound like anybody else. You sound like you.
Right. And that is always not great for me. Here I am. I'm the 40-year-old guy playing, tiny little nightclubs. I'm able to make a living, but like it's it's close to the bone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never had a tour manager in my entire life. Like, it's close to the bone. I'm doing this because I really love doing it. And if I had to make it sound like something else, I would just go do another job and make a lot more money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I like doing it this way. I find it extremely meaningful and satisfying. And so here I am, for better or for worse.
Yeah. What do you think you would be doing if you weren't?
Sales, probably.
Really?
Yeah, you just make a bunch of money in sales, and you just talk to people, and
I don't know you real well, but I feel like you'd be miserable.
I'd be miserable, but I feel like you can make a lot of money in a short amount of time, and you get off the job as much as possible. Just make money.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I'm a middle school English teacher, and then I do this as a passion, and as in podcasting, this does not pay the bills.
Heck no. Not even close.
So I think about that a lot, and thankfully, I've kind of structured my life where like teaching allows for me to have the time to do things like this, right?
Absolutely.
So I've got the summers off and I've got the spring breaks, and so I can write and I can podcast and I can do all that for my passion. I can travel. Like I'm gonna head up to Kentucky and Tennessee this summer and go to a couple festivals and cover and interview people. And I've structured my life that way. But part of it also for me is like something you said resonated with me earlier, which is like I couldn't do sales. Like, and no offense to people who do sales, but like I would just be so sad because I need out of my work the ability to walk away from it and be like, oh, what I did today made a huge fucking difference. Mm-hmm. And I envy people who can compartmentalize, and go like, well, it's a job and I'm going to do the job and then I'm going to go home and I'm going to be a father and a husband
do the stuff
and
that's meaningful.
All that stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I'm just not geared that way,
I get that.
Yeah. Speaking of the podcast, The Working Songwriter, I got a great compliment recently where somebody compared what I do to what you do, and I was like, oh, hell yeah, thank you. That's really kind. Where do you see... I'm constantly thinking about... We were having a conversation earlier. Peter and I do some work over on the Patreon, on my Patreon, and he's been a great supporter of the show. We were talking about the Marinade earlier. And I was talking about how, like, the way I think about these conversations now and how it's evolved. Mm-hmm. How do you think The Working Songwriter has evolved, and what do you see as sort of like the next steps?
I think as the podcast is just evolved in that I'm able to more casually have the conversations. I used to do a lot of in-depth research on people, but then I kind of realized that I don't re-interview people too much, so all of the interviews have just kind of taken on this structure of like your early years, your middle years, and what are you doing now? Yeah. And so I don't need to do a ton of research on people because sometimes the research gets in the way and it stops me from having a conversation. Dude. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I do enough research coming into a thing so that I'm not going to freaking pronounce somebody's name wrong, not know the major. I mean, you have to give them the due respect of knowing what they're about. But beyond that, I let the research go and I just have a conversation. I have the 8 bullet points I want to hit. And if we have a great conversation between bullet point number 2 and number 4 and we don't get to 5 through 8, that is better than rotely going through 20 bullet points with impeccable research.
The first time I interviewed you, I had a whole huge page of bullet points and so forth. This is what I have now.
And this time you have a handful. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think we just talked. Peter and I were talking about this yesterday, and I think what has happened for me at least, and I hope folks listening feel the same way, is that it has made for richer conversations. Actual conversations. Like the tangent that we had about the NFL, I don't think I would have had that last time I talked to you, even if I knew that.
100%.
Right? Because I would have been like, no, I still need to ask about Nation of Heat, and I still need to,
Sure.
would have had all these things I wanted to talk to you about, and instead now we're just having a conversation, which I think makes for a much more compelling listen.
I think obviously so.
Yeah.
For sure.
Dude, I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time, and you're going to go on.
Yeah.
Well, who knows when you're going to go on, because apparently doors are already. We thought they were in 20 minutes, but but I do want to make sure that we hit what we always end on, which is what you're getting down on. So the art that has you inspired right now, like a book you're reading or music or.
Yeah. I just read Mark Twain's book, Joan of Arc, which is great. It's a historical fiction book. It's excellent. It was originally serialized in Harper's at the turn of the 20th century, and it's really good. He considered it, apparently, this is what it said on the back of the dust cover of the book, who knows what's true, but apparently he considered it his greatest work, and it's my favorite Mark Twain book that I've read. So reading that, and then I've been really listening to a ton of Tony Rice and on kind of that Ricky Skaggs period of him and Ricky Skaggs type period. Been listening to
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is that kind of stuff, is bluegrass like in that vein something that you've long been into, or is that a relatively new thing?
Yeah, I really do like kind of what would you describe, like kind of like Protestant American church music.
Yeah.
I really like it a lot. And that obviously is the bedrock of bluegrass. So I deal with the shredding. I'm fine with the shredding. You know what I mean? But it's mainly the catalog that they tend to play that I really like. And Tony Rice can obviously shred, and that's what people love him for. But I really love his voice. It's very pure and true, kind of lower voice. And him and Skaggs together are just really great.
Man, that's awesome. Joe, I'm so excited for the show tonight. Thank you
Great.
so much for your time, as always.
Thanks
Do you
for
have the
listening.
record on tour for sale, or is it not out yet? Not revealed yet?
I don't know why I didn't bring it. I think I tend to bring the 10-inch records because they're just lighter to travel with.
Easier,
But
yeah.
As soon as
yeah.
the record's out, I'll start.
Okay.
Them. But
All
yeah.
right. Yeah. Dude, thank you.
Thanks.
Really
Thanks
appreciate
for hosting
it.
me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Joe Pug, y'all. Thank you so much, Joe. Thank all of you for listening. JoePugMusic.com for all things Joe Pug. The song you're hearing in this episode is Treasury of Prayers from the forthcoming much-anticipated record, Sketch of a Promised Departure. You heard him talk about all of the innovative ways in which you can support his work. I scooped up a hat and a copy of Nation of the Heat Revisited at the show, and I'm so glad I did. I love both of those. MarinadePodcast.com for all things The Marinade. Follow us on all the things: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, Spoutable, Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon. I'm taking a little bit of a break from social media at the moment. I'm not totally off of it. I'm still, fuck with Reddit a little bit, and I'm going to pop into Twitter and Instagram and just kind of check my messages and notifications and respond to some folks, but I'm not as responsive as I normally would be over on those channels at the moment, so be patient with me, but you can email us, marinadepodcast@gmail.com. I'm still checking that all the time and responding. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. Tell a friend about the show. These are all free ways to support the show. Go do that right now while you're listening, please. It makes a big difference for us and costs so little of your time and effort. If you like what we're doing and can swing it, consider joining our Patreon community. For just $2 a month, you can gain access to Patreon-exclusive content. That's stuff like our show, Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life and provide a window into the process of making the Marinade. One of the best days of the month for me is recording What We're Getting Down On with my dear friend, the brilliant and hilarious Peter Haraldson. That's about the art that has us fired up at the moment. Peter was actually there with Joe in the green room with me and Joe during the conversation. He spent a weekend with me. We recorded a live What We're Getting Down On that same weekend. And I'm reminded as I'm recording this that we owe y'all a February edition, but my life has been so scrambled at the moment, so we'll make that happen as soon as possible. You can try a free trial of Patreon to see if you like it. No pressure. Try it for 7 days. Set a reminder on your phone in case you want to cancel. Keep going if you dig it. If you want to support the show financially, but you don't want to commit to a monthly subscription, I totally get that. You can Venmo or PayPal us. It's just at the Marinade, and all the money goes right back into the making of the show. We're going to cover some festivals in the new year. It just feels weird saying the new year here in February, but it does kind of like oddly feel like the year just started. At the same time, it feels like the longest year in the world. So regardless, we got a lot of cool stuff going on in the new year. And above all, we're just thankful that you listen and spread the word about the Marinade. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.